The IDF is changing the rules of the game, preparing for intense fighting in Rafah in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas has no idea how to respond. In Lebanon, Hezbollah has problems that go beyond its fragile ceasefire with Israel, and its domestic opponents are also increasing the pressure, including in the national parliament. Meanwhile, Israel is standing firm on the demand that Hezbollah move all its assets north of the Litani River and the Lebanese National Army deploy south of the river in order to fill the security vacuum. This was the agreement for the original ceasefire, and if Hezbollah does not honor it, then Israel will not leave southern Lebanon by the end of the 60-day truce, which is already more than halfway over. Next door in Syria, Turkey is moving quickly to consolidate its grip on the new regime in Damascus. In Yemen, the commanders of the Houthis have gone from hunters to hunted, as Israel has threatened to assassinate them in retaliation for the launching of ballistic missiles at our country. The Houthi leadership is now underground and have thrown away their phones in order to try and hide from the Israeli Mossad. And meanwhile, in Judea and Samaria, 3 Israelis were murdered in cold blood and 8 others wounded in a horrific terrorist attack on Monday. The IDF has launched a manhunt for the terrorists, and an Israeli Air Force aircraft struck a terrorist cell in the Nablus area connected to the incident. While all of this is going on, negotiations for the release of Israeli hostages in Gaza continues. Hamas has submitted yet another proposed list of hostages to be released, and Israel negotiators say it is an old list that is no longer relevant. Hamas is also demanding a suspension in fighting to clarify the state of the hostages, while the Israeli negotiations teams suggested a compromise in which Hamas would release a small number of hostages as a sign of good faith. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 458 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and all the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. All of them are acting under the auspices of Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, please click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Every subscriber amplifies our reach in sharing the truth, so please help us with this important work. In recent days, there has been a significant increase in the amount of firepower the IDF is deploying in the Gaza Strip, including airstrikes, but also artillery and ground maneuvering forces, especially in the Bet Hanun area in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Reports in Arab media portals speak of an intensity to airstrikes that is comparable to the intensity of the fighting in the war's early days. The Israeli Air Force has hit targets in the central camps of Nusirat, Dir el-Balach, El-Burij, and El-Zaweda, and has also targeted terrorists in Khan Yunis. A joint statement by the IDF and the Shin Bet stated that in a joint effort by the Israeli Air Force and the Southern Command, directed by military intelligence, Amman, and the Shin Bet, fighter jets and aircraft struck more than 100 terror targets across the Gaza Strip this past weekend. Dozens of Hamas terrorists were eliminated in these strikes. At the same time, Israel is about to significantly expand the humanitarian zone in the Gaza Strip in preparations for a second ground operation expected in Rafah. The report on these efforts was issued in the last 24 hours and stated in part that the move is a practical step on the way to launching the operation, which government officials have been discussing for some time now. The statement by the IDF spokesperson's office added that the missions of Unit 504, the special unit in the IDF's intelligence directorate, will be expanded, and the unit's commander will be promoted to brigadier general rank. Throughout the war, Unit 504 has operated intensively in various theaters and led the effort in which thousands of Hamas terrorists, as well as those from Hezbollah and the Syrian front, were arrested and interrogated. The unit has also been involved in gathering information on many targets that were attacked and in the covert handling of agents in various enemy states. During the war, the unit reopened a dedicated agent handling domain for the Gaza Strip after its activity in that domain had been closed more than a decade ago. The scope of human intelligence activity in the unit has grown significantly during this period. Based partially on information provided by this unit, the overall IDF intelligence assessment is that it will take about 3 more weeks to clean out the north of the Gaza Strip from terror infrastructure unless a deal is reached that changes the situation on the ground. This raises the question about why the IDF is not taking more decisive action to achieve a victory. Possibly the answer lies in the international pressure limiting its freedom of military action, but a cost of restricting the operation is clear: a protracted erosion of Israel's deterrent status vis-a-vis Hamas, which is, with its last efforts, trying to sow fear in the people of Israel. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every military development in the Gaza Strip. Before we move on to the steady weakening of the ceasefire in Lebanon due to Hezbollah's repeated violations, I want to call on you to take action. We need your support now more than ever. We at TBN Israel bring you the truth every day, and to continue doing so, we need your support. So please donate to us via the donations button on YouTube, or go to our website at tbnisrael.com/give. Every dollar you give will go towards ensuring that the truth from Israel will go to the rest of the world. Moving on to Lebanon. While Israel senses that the Lebanese National Army and the internationally recognized government in Beirut is interested in enforcing the ceasefire, Hezbollah itself still has not withdrawn beyond the Litani River. The 60-day ceasefire is supposed to end in less than 3 weeks on the 26th of this month, but the United States is currently working on an extension. Israeli officials have warned that if Hezbollah attacks Israel after the 60 days, it will receive a harsh blow in response. They also reiterated that UN Security Council Resolution 1701, never implemented by Hezbollah, will not get a rerun. Additionally, as Defense Minister Israel Katz said yesterday, Israel is acting to enforce the ceasefire on its side amid repeated violations by Hezbollah. This does not only concern Hezbollah's non-withdrawal, but also armed men roaming areas that had been cleared before, transferring weapons, etc. The existing enforcing mechanism, which includes the supervising nations, also allows Israel, if necessary, to enforce the ceasefire and push back on violations. As an example of the difficulty Israel is having, the IDF was on track to withdraw from the village of Nakura, but the Lebanese National Army was not ready to deploy in this village, and Hezbollah continued to operate nearby, giving every indication that it would move back in and rebuild its fighting positions once the IDF was gone. Under these circumstances, it is impossible for the IDF to withdraw as planned. This is just one village, and this same scenario is playing out all over southern Lebanon. Options on the table include extending the ceasefire by another 30 days, returning to active warfare, or waiting for the other side's reactions. Of these 3 possibilities, extending the agreement is currently the most realistic, but it's only a temporary solution that does not change the balance of power in this region. Against the backdrop of presidential elections in Lebanon, we will wait and see in the coming days which way the wind blows and whether we are heading back to intensified fighting in Lebanon. On Monday, me and my team went up to the northern Israeli border, almost to the Hermon mountain, to see the situation on the ground firsthand, so we can tell you what's going on out there. We plan on producing more reports about this crucial topic, so stay tuned and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground or any other program. And now switching our focus slightly east to Syria, where the IDF is currently deployed in positions about 25 kilometers from Damascus, the capital of Syria. Heavy equipment is being brought in to set up defensive fortifications and create a protective buffer and a demilitarized area. The purpose is to prevent any hostile force from approaching the border and, in general, keep the instability in Syria from spilling over into Israeli territory. And meanwhile, in northern Syria, the United States is trying to prevent a Turkish invasion, and everything depends on it. According to reports in American media portals, there are around 2,000 US Special Forces troops operating in northern Syria in support of the Kurdish factions that control these areas. If these American forces withdraw, the Kurds will stand alone against Turkey and the jihadist forces which have taken control in much of the rest of Syria. They will have no chance, and everyone knows it. Turkey is moving quickly, having already taken control of 3 areas along the Syria border: Jarablus, Afrin, and Tel Abyad. It already has a military presence along the Syria-Turkey border corridor, but it has not yet fulfilled its territorial ambitions. However, Turkey's strategic objective is clear: to push the Kurds 30 kilometers away from Turkey's border, and the American presence in the area is a significant obstacle. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on Monday that the end of the Kurdish militias in Syria is near, adding that there is no place for terror in Syria's future after the downfall of Bashar al-Assad last month. It seems apparent that the Turks are determined to take advantage of the successes of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and conquer Syria, making it their client state. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on the border with Syria that could affect Israel. If you want to know more, visit our website at tbnisrael.com for daily news in between our video updates. Shifting our focus now to the most distant front of Israel's war, the Houthis in Yemen. According to a source close to the Houthi leadership in Yemen, militia leaders have begun to change their location frequently and take heightened security measures amid Israeli threats to eliminate the organization's senior members. A report this week in the Wall Street Journal news portal said that these militia leaders are spending most of their time in underground bunkers and avoiding the use of mobile devices which will reveal their location to Israeli aircrafts or ground agents. They are also changing the location frequently, trying to stay on the move to prevent a more difficult target. Israel is threatening to target these Houthi leaders in retaliation for the near-daily missile attacks by the Houthis towards Israel, forcing millions of Israelis to run to shelters in the early morning hours and disrupting the return of international airlines, causing immense economic and diplomatic damage to the state of Israel. Defense Minister Israel Katz declared at the end of December, after a 4th round of Israeli strikes against the Houthis since July, "We will hunt all the Houthi leaders and hit them as we did in other places." The Houthis pose a unique security challenge for Israel due to the geographic distance, a lack of intelligence on the organization, and the fact that retaliatory strikes against them only increase local support for the group without halting the attacks. The organization only has operational control over a small area in northwestern Yemen, but it is the area where most of Yemen's population lives and most of its economic assets are located. Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East, and the population is suffering from deep poverty. Although many probably don't like the Houthis, they are the closest thing Yemen has to a government, and the population depends on them to organize international humanitarian aid shipments and other things that they need to survive. Meanwhile, the IDF has defined the Houthis as an autonomous terrorist organization that relies on Iranian cooperation and funding for carrying out attacks. Yuli Edelstein, chair of the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defensive Committee, told the Wall Street Journal recently that Israel tends to adopt a similar approach as it did against Hamas and Hezbollah, direct confrontation with the organization rather than a broader conflict with Iran. And meanwhile, another senior Israeli official told the Wall Street Journal that Israel is working to deepen its intelligence in order to enable strikes on Houthi leaders, noting that one must distinguish between the immediate threat from the Houthis and the longer-term strategic threat from Iran. Here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on any developments with the Houthis and the broader confrontation with Iran. As always, I will ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, subscribing to this YouTube channel, and following us on social media. Subscribing to this channel is helping us reach more people around the world with the truth so that they can pray for the situation in this country. Now switching our focus once again to the ongoing battle against terrorism and lawlessness in Judea and Samaria. It is my sad duty to report to you that on Monday, a shooting attack on vehicles traveling between Funduk and Kdumim, north of Jerusalem, resulted in the deaths of 3 Israelis, while 8 others were wounded. The victims included 2 women in their 60s and a police officer in his 40s. From the IDF's initial investigation of the attack, it appears that the terrorists fled to nearby villages shortly after an Israeli civilian returned fire at them. The IDF believes there were at least 3 attackers armed with rifles and pistols, which they used to fire dozens of bullets before fleeing to the area around Nablus. A manhunt has been launched to find these attackers, and it's only a matter of hours, maybe days, until the Shin Bet gets its hands on them and on those who sent them. The goal of this security service is not only to capture and eliminate the murderers, but also to operate in the heart of Islamic Jihad and Hamas activity in Nablus, Tulkarem, Balata, and Hebron, so that no terrorist think he can carry out a similar attack in the future. And earlier in the week, on Saturday night, an airstrike was conducted on a terrorist operational base in the Balata refugee camp north of Jerusalem. The base was used to plan and organize terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians, and more such attacks were being planned for the near future. Parallel to this operation, Muhammad Zahad, a resident of the refugee camp and a leader of the terrorist group active there, was also terminated. He was just the latest in a large wave of terrorist operatives who have been eliminated or arrested in the last year all over Judea and Samaria. In fact, according to data from the IDF and the Shin Bet, since the beginning of the war, 770 terrorists were eliminated, of which about 220 were terminated in airstrikes, an action the IDF had not previously carried out in Judea and Samaria. Over 6,000 were arrested and more than 1,500 pieces of weaponry were seized. The Shin Bet thwarted 1,040 attempts to carry out major attacks in Judea and Samaria and in Jerusalem this year, but did not manage to prevent 231, which is a record high since 2021. According to assessments, Judea and Samaria are flooded with tens of thousands of weapons of various types. In some cases, these are improvised weapons manufactured in machine shops in the territories. Though the police this year recorded a 91% increase in capturing weapons and destroying machine shops for improvised weapons in the territories, for every machine shop that is closed, another one soon opens. To no one's surprise, much of the weaponry in Judea and Samaria has been smuggled in by Iran. Iran acts extensively to create a significant terror infrastructure in Judea and Samaria. Most of its activity is focused in northern Samaria, in Jenin, Tulkarem, and also in Nablus. And recently, it has also spread via Hamas to Judea, Hebron, and its surroundings. The IDF understands that this activity demands a lot of persistence, creativity, and power. Some of the weapons are smuggled from Jordan into the Jordan Valley and from there to terror hubs. The difficult economic situation in the West Bank, partially due to the closure preventing young people from finding stable employment, is causing many of them to end up in terror organization. Even if they do not share the ideology of these groups, they are ready to carry out murderous attacks in exchange for high wages. It is also important to point out that the kinds of weapons that Iran is smuggling into the region are not just rifles and pistols. It also includes heavy, game-changing weaponry such as RPGs, mortars, and short-range rockets. During the year, the security system seized 80 Klimagor IEDs, 75 RPG launchers, 20 mortars, and 3 short-range rockets, according to figures published by the Shin Bet last week. Additionally, 25 kilograms of explosives were seized, but in at least 2 cases, the Palestinians managed to transport a car bomb, one of which exploded in Palestinian villages, and fortunately, there were no casualties beyond the terrorists who operated that car. Iran is responsible for all of this, constantly trying to create additional fronts against Israel after losing the Assad regime in Syria and watching Hamas and Hezbollah seriously degraded. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to monitor developments in Judea and Samaria so we can bring you the latest news. Once again, we ask you to help us by sharing these videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and subscribing to this channel. This is very helpful to us as we work to bring the truth to the world. And shifting our focus once again to the ongoing efforts to secure the release of Israeli hostages being held in Gaza. The Saudi news portal Ashrak El Awsat and the BBC News both reported this week that Hamas published on Monday a list of 34 hostages it claims it is ready to release in the first stage of a potential ceasefire agreement with Israel. Among the names are 10 women and 11 older hostages aged 50 and 85, as well as the children of the Bibas family. It also includes the names of several hostages Hamas says are ill. However, Israeli sources clarified that this is a list that Israel sent in the past and that, so far, Hamas has not sent any list. Negotiations for a ceasefire resumed in Doha, Qatar, over the weekend, but it appears that the talks have not progressed significantly. A senior Hamas official told Reuters news agency that any agreement to return Israeli hostages would hinge on an agreement in which Israel withdraws from the Gaza Strip and on a permanent ceasefire or the end of the war. The official added an accusation that until now the occupation remains stubborn regarding an agreement on a ceasefire and withdrawal and has not made any step forward. All of that having been said, according to information that has reached us, the compromise proposed has essentially been accepted by Hamas's external leadership in Qatar, but no answer has been received from the organization's leadership in the Gaza Strip. As is known, final decisions are made by the leadership in Gaza, so uncertainty remains about progress on this deal. And despite the cautious optimism expressed by some of those involved, doubts remain about the real possibility of reaching an agreement in the near term. Hamas in Gaza is driven primarily by broader strategic considerations, mainly reasserting its control in the Gaza Strip and restoring its status. This is according to a source. As long as that is their main goal, it's difficult to see them finalizing a deal without making significant concessions. These developments come in the wake of the video released of the 19-year-old hostage Liri El-Bag, which Hamas published a few days ago, calling on the Israeli government to make a deal. Time will tell whether a situation that satisfies both sides will be found or whether the stalemate continues. Our role in this is to pray for the hostages, and in order to help you do that, I want to have a face to make it personal. Ariel and Kfir Bibas were the youngest Israelis to be kidnapped on October 7th, with Ariel being 4 years old at the time and Kfir being just 9 months. Ariel is known for his vibrant personality and curiosity, who enjoyed playing with his younger brother, Kfir, and is described as a joyful child who brings happiness to those around him. Kfir's presence brought immense joy to his parents and older brother. Kfir's early months were filled with love and care from his family, and he marked his first birthday in captivity on January 18, 2024. If he is not released soon, his second birthday in captivity will come in less than 2 weeks. Please pray for these hostages, and beyond that, pray for peace for the people of Israel. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are fighting in Lebanon, Syria, in the Gaza Strip, in Judea and Samaria. Pray for them to be protected. And don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We believe in an awesome God. And despite all these challenges, we have faith in Him that He will bring the victory to this region and for Israel.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.